Hey, folks, welcome to Mindset Matters. Steffany,
Hey, hon.
how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm feeling, really in balance and
You're feeling in
inspired.
balance.
And,
Okay.
my theme for this year, as much as it's clarity equals velocity, is self care. So, really working hard to make sure I build in some self care every day.
Beautiful. Well, balance. That is a segue into today's topic, which is work life balance. The myth of, and what does it even mean? We constantly, I want to say constantly, I don't want to make it sound like that, but we often, I'll use that term, we often are talking to people and speaking with people, and there is a sense of that they bring up is I just don't have any work life balance. And they carry a lot of stress with it, or they carry a lot of judgment of it, or it bums them out, or there's some, I guess, degree, some jag around it. And let's bust the myth today. Let's talk about work life balance and what does it mean?
Well, to me, it's a myth. I don't think it's true. I think it's a BS or a belief system that people are striving for something that's unattainable. If you're seeking a work life balance, it means you're trying to even things out. I don't know, is it time? You want to give as much time to your life as to your business or to your work or to your family. And it's like you're doing some sort of math equation, and I really don't think that's healthy, to be honest. I think having a work life balance means when you're present to what you're doing in your work, are you present to what you're doing in your work? And when you're at home with your family, are you present to with your family? And I think that's what I would like to do, and unpack a little bit in this conversation, because when you're striving for something that's unattainable, I can't imagine the stress and anxiety that goes along with that.
Well, I think there's a fundamental when we look at work life balance, because there was a time in our life many years ago where we strive for work life balance. It didn't feel right. And a lot of that was driven by the fact that it was all work and no play. Maybe that was the story, or there was just never enough time in the day to do all the things that we wanted to do because we seemed to be building businesses and building careers, and there was no time for rest, or we didn't believe there was any time for rest. And it was so different, early on in building the business. And I see that with individuals building a business, building a career, is that you're so focused on doing that that at some point you get tired because you're looking at people around you maybe doing something that you want to do. Maybe you're not spending enough time with the kids or with the significant other, and you're feeling guilty about that. Some of it comes with guilt, some of it comes with burnout. So when we start to break it down, I think it's important to let's look at what is the sense or the feeling of not having work life balance. So somewhere along the line, there's a story of saying all I seem to be doing is working, and I'm not getting the most out of life because there's more to life than just work. So in other words, when do I get to play? When do I get to have more time for myself? When do I get to have time for my family, my friends, for leisure, for just sitting around and doing nothing? So if we start from that, because that's really what the story ultimately is, too much work, not enough life.
Or on the other side, it's, you've got a young family, and one of the parents is at home, and their whole entire world is about family and kids and diapers and meals and shopping, and maybe there's just that side of it as well. So I think what we could really shine a light a little bit on is choice. Is where are you in the stage, sorry, or the cycle of your life where you're focusing on certain things? Like, what is your priority? And the other thing is, do you have an agreement with your significant other or partners whereby you have communication where you say, this is what we're going to do for the next 3 to 5 years, and this is your role and this is my role, and what we commit together is to, I don't know, 2 to 3 vacations a year, or we take long weekends every quarter. So you start to break down agreements in a different way, instead of just going into this whole paint a busy picture thing, because I have to work to raise the family, and support the family, and then I have to work to raise the family, and then we come to sort of an impasse. And I think that's where the conversation around fighting for balance within a relationship can come in. I think for us early on building businesses, I loved it. I didn't realize I was out of balance. I didn't think I was. I was having a great time. I love the people we were hanging out with. I love the people we were working with, that we were serving, that our clients. I think where we heard it mostly was with families. Like, you guys are so busy. Like, when are you going to have time to come over and visit and all those kinds of conversations? So that's really where I think the judgment or that guilt can land for people.
Yeah, but let's go back a little bit because there was a time where we didn't feel. I know I'll just speak for myself. I know there was a time when I felt like there was no work-life balance. There was no balance in my life. It was all work, work, work. And then there's a part of it that is driven by the judgment that you should be working less and playing more. There's the judgment or the pressure that you feel from peers, from family, saying, when are you going to come hang out, or when are you going to do this or do that? So let's just kind of go back to, first off, what is the story that you're telling yourself about not having work life balance? Now, we call it a myth because there is a way to contextualize it. So, in other words, it's not to negate the feeling of not having work life balance, but when you start to break it down, when you start to look at it and say, okay, well, what's driving that feeling of not having work life balance? Why do I feel that way? And then, are you really okay with it? Or are you feeling guilty because you're being judged or getting pressure from peers or family?
Bless you.
Or is it because lots of guys like us, I remember we came to a time when I was asked that question, how many hours in a week do you work? And I thought like, in the moment, it caught me off guard. I just come off stage, was doing this chat, had kind of did this presentation. I don't even remember what it was, but obviously somebody picked up on it that it seemed I was working a lot. And they came up to me and they go, "Gosh, Patrick, you're doing so much. You know, how many hours a week do you work?" And in that moment, it was like, gosh, I don't have any idea. I don't look at my life that way. I don't look at how many hours do I work. And that's primarily because we came to a place where we realized that we love what we do. And if we don't love what we do, then we either change it, or, in other words, change what we do so that we love it, and or adjust the business model so that we're doing what we love to do. So that's one aspect of it. And then if we're not feeling that we don't have the time that we want for leisure, for friends, for family, then we start to make those adjustments. So we're working backwards to that. But I think there's a part of it, and I'll just finish on this, is that, and I want to get to it, is that it can't be I'll be happy when. This is something that we, put a little bit cautionary flag. If you're finding yourself using that language, I'll just be happy when I have work-life balance, then that's problematic right to start. So then we work backwards saying, okay, well, how do we kind of get present to what it is today and actually get rid of the story called work-life balance and just say, I have a life and I either love my life or I don't love my life, or there's aspects I really love and other aspects I don't. How do I come to some equilibrium in that? How's that for a setup?
Yeah, wow. Well, I look about, the last 3 to 4 years, I think people have had an opportunity to look at their life and say, okay, this is working, this isn't working. What do I love to do? What do I not love to do? What's being taken away from me? What's being brought into my life? And let's take a look at it. Let's reevaluate, because we really do only have one life. We have a life
Mhm.
that encompasses family and encompasses work and encompasses play and hobbies. I'm not a big hobby person, and I love what I do, but I also know how to rest. I know how to dial it down. I can go on vacation and not open my computer for days, which is funny because, you say work-life balance. We'll go on vacation and you'll be working on your computer on the balcony in St. Lucia, running your life, running your business. So some people would look at that and go, well, how is that, not checking out? And to me, checking out doesn't mean going on vacation and running away from our life. I mean, I love our life. When we go on vacation, is because we want to go on vacation, but we're not leaving our life to find some sort of elusive balance, to create some sort of equation that happens in the life, so that when you look back and say, oh, I had a really great work-life balance, and I can die happy. So yeah, I think there's a place where we look at our life and say, okay, do I love what I'm doing? Yes. Am I having fun? Yes. Not all the time. But I also am not going to blow it up and wait to be happy when something happens. I used to be in business with somebody that used to say, well, I'll be happy. I'll just get through these next 2 weeks, and then I'll be happy. And I'll just work on this thing until then I'll be happy. I'll just get through this. And that was a real, like you say, a real big red flag for me. is that she wasn't happy in the moment doing what the things that she was doing. She was going to be happy when it was over or when she accomplished something. And those to me, that's a language that I think we need to pay attention to. In your life, in your family, if you're listening to your kids talk about they're going to be happy when the season's over, or they're going to be happy when school's done, or I'll be happy when I finish exams. Well, the truth is we have to be and find a way to be happy now. Do we always like what we're doing? No. But we also know that the commitment that it takes to move our life and live the life that we want requires the ability to be present. People always used to say to me, "Oh my gosh, you're so busy, you're so busy, you're so busy." And that word just never landed for me. I just couldn't believe it. I'm not busy. I'm sitting around doing nothing most of the time, or I'm on calls, or I'm driving to the rink, or I'm doing something going to an airport. And then I realized, and then my line became, "No, I'm not busy. I'm just complicated." And people didn't
You just
like the
come.
fact that I was complicated. They wanted it to be busy, and I'm like, "No, I'm choosing to do what I'm doing. If you don't like the fact that I'm not doing it with you, then maybe that's a conversation we can have. If you want to spend more time with me, or you want me to get on an airplane and fly to your city more, or we want to spend more time together, then that's a
Mhm.
conversation we can have. But don't call me busy, and don't use that as an excuse that we're not hanging out."
Well, I think that's more the issue, right? Is that in that context, what you just shared was mostly it was being driven primarily by the fact that people were using it as a reason to not reach out, or they're telling the story of why why they haven't connected. So I got all that. So there is a part of it that I want to go back to, something that kind of showed up for me in all of this conversation. So let's get back to one of the things that we talk a lot about, and I want to not step over the conversation about values and living a values driven life. And there's a few things that I was reminded of in the context of all of this work life balance. When you're doing what you love to do, in other words, when you're living true to your values, then nothing ever gets old because you're living your highest values. And that's, I think, more the ultimate kind of place to get to, is that where you're living your values. We've been very fortunate that mostly we live our values. And so when we're living into our values, that's because we're intentional about it. Nothing seems like work because we're doing what we are kind of driven to do, what we love to do. We're living our values. And I think that's an important kind of context to set all of this up. If you're going to work every day and grinding it out, and you hate your job and you hate your boss or you hate your teammates or some version of it, then yeah, you're going to need a rest from that. You're going to need a break from that. And the better solution would be to say, okay, how can I change this? What do I love about what I'm doing? And how do I create that so I'm doing more of what I love to do? And then there's the other side of this, which is the story we tell ourselves. Now, something you said kind of hit me, which is the challenges we face. We don't love it every day, but we complain about, let's say, or we don't like some of the challenges that get in our way. Now, we can bitch about it, we can complain about it, or we can recontextualize it, which is this. And this is the hard part. I struggle with this. I know it. Like, I know I struggle with this, but at least I have a language in my own mind for it, which is that you, and I go back to the analogy of the gym. You go out, you work out, and you lift heavier to get stronger. And some days you go to lift and you can't, and you have to go backwards, and you have to actually keep working at something smaller to get to something bigger. But it's the challenges that make you stronger. And I see that in life in general, is that it is in fact the challenges that make us stronger, but that's not what we want. We actually, in our brains, want it to be easy. We want it to be easier. And it's just not. Life is fucking hard. That's it. And if it was easier, then I guess we would be less productive. We're already in a world of less productivity. Let's not go down there because it gets political really fast. But you understand what I'm saying is that we have to look at it and go, okay, love the grind because it's a grind.
It is. And when the minute you admit that life is hard, it gets easy. That's the
Mhm.
thing, is that it's the fantasy or the story of it. It should be easier. I should be working, or it should be more fun, shouldn't it? This should be simpler, or this should be a better experience, shouldn't it? This should be more fun. It should be more like a concert every day and a roller coaster ride, shouldn't it? So that's the story. And as soon as you admit that life is hard, then life gets easy. And I really found that over the years is that, nothing is easy. I mean, life is simple. It can be simple, but it's not easy.
No,
So
it's
the
not.
easy word, is something that I think gets, I don't know, it's like a trap. You know what I mean?
It is a trap. But there's a couple things, right? So first off, I want to go back to values. Now, we talk about values and we talk about the 7 areas of life. We've had these conversations on this podcast many times. So if you're a first-time listener, you may not get the conversation, but when we talk about values, living our core values, living our highest values, it's a values based conversation that says, okay, if we can recognize what our core values are, if we can be true to who we really are and live our truth and live our highest values, then life will start to feel better. It doesn't mean it's less work. It just means at least you're working hard doing what you love to do. Now, Ray Dalio did something. Now, when we look at, and he said something, and this is, I think, is so important. He said, now let me read this quote from Ray Dalio. If we're not credible enough, then let's tap into Ray Dalio, who's a pretty credible dude. Okay, so there are all kinds of different people in the world, many of whom value different kinds of things. If you find you can't get in sync with someone on shared values, you should consider whether that person is worth keeping in your life. A
Mm.
lack of common values will lead to a lot of pain and other harmful consequences and may ultimately drive you apart. It might be better to head all of that off as soon as you see it coming. Now, this is so important
Whoa.
because if you're hanging out with people that your values aren't aligned, that will be painful. That will feel heavy. And then ultimately, it will lead to some drama and some relational breakdown. And so, the reason I shine a light on that is an example of values. If you're going into your career, to your job every day, and the people around you or the company doesn't stand for what you stand for, are you out of integrity and are you feeling the load of grinding it out, doing what you hate to do? There's a way bigger difference between grinding it out, doing things you absolutely don't love to do. In other words, hanging out with people that don't share common values, for example, and or doing what you love to do, but working your ass off with a team of people that are all loving what they do or are all pushing in the same direction. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, or at least there are a certain alignment of values and conversations that you can have that are committed to, busting through some of the barriers that make it difficult, that make it hard. There's a great poem, and I've seen it come up over the last little while, and I won't do it justice, but I think it's called Choose Your Hard. Marriage is
Mm-hmm.
hard, divorce is hard. Choose your
Mm-hmm.
hard.
Yeah.
Being fit is hard, being obese is hard. Choose your hard. So there's 5 or 6 different lines in that particular poem, and I just love it because the truth is, what we choose, if we don't get behind it, we can be obese or we can be fit. Both are hard. It's hard to be fit, but it's also hard living overweight and living a life of not, being healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to choose our hard, and I think that's where the life balance myth kind of work life balance myth kind of gets me going, is that the strive to be mediocre, I think, is what comes up when I think about, splitting the difference between something being easy and being hard, and just not really fully committing to what it is that you love to do. Because even what I love to do, it's not easy every day. Is it
Mm-hmm.
it can be hard, but I'd rather have something be hard and aligned with my values and what I love to do, and I can be focused on a certain outcome, rather than have it be hard and a slog and just feeling like I'm a slave to the clock or the golden handcuffs or whatever. So I think it's really about choosing your hard.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who did that. I think it was Mark Manson, but I think he said, what's your shit sandwich that you're going to eat? Like like
Exactly.
it was a different, but there is those that philosophically though, but that's exactly whether it was him that choose your heart or eat a shit sandwich. I mean, it was some version of that. I don't know who was choose your heart. Doesn't matter. The point is that yes, choose your heart. But there's a part of it when let's go back into this work life and then just kind of connect it to a couple things. There was or work-life balance is that it all is connected to life satisfaction. It is connected to happiness. And, a really cool conversation that I listened in on a podcast that I was following along, and something that they said triggered a thought process for me, and which is that I came to the conclusion that our satisfaction or our happiness in life is actually the sum of the quality of our life minus our envy of others.
Hoo-hoo, zing.
You get it?
Yeah.
So, how we see our work life balance, how we see our happiness, how we see our
Mm.
satisfaction in life is the sum of the quality of how we see our life minus our envy of others. Now, that is actually statistically data. There's data on it. That's what kind of tweaked me on this, because I looked at it. And since I think the chart I looked at was since 2016, the degree of happiness or satisfaction in life, and I'm going to say work life balance fits in that kind of overarching category of things that are being measured, really changed from about 2016. It just has gone down and off the charts. And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? Here's my theory on it. Number one, we've had the past 4 years of
A
coming
shit
out of
sandwich.
lockdown, a total shit show of how things got handled, polarity, divisiveness, global blah, 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 all the rest of it. But there's another part of it that I think is probably even more impactful, even to this day. And I believe that envy is being driven by the increasing amount of social media platforms. And I'm so conscious of this and have been for years. They capture that special moment in time. So, in other words, we've got these platforms that are capturing the moments in time, and the end result of that moment in time, whether it's staged or it's real, but it's put on these social media platforms by others. And I don't care who you are, I don't think you can stop. You'd have to be pretty highly evolved, number one, to not go down those rabbit holes of comparison at some level, probably subconsciously at least, short of just staying off of all social media platforms, which is a possibility. But ultimately, I think that has a huge impact on what's going on in the world of our lack of self satisfaction, our lack of happiness, joy, and our sense of where we sit in the scope of work life balance, because we're seeing the moment in time of that picture.
Yeah,
And
and then we're comparing ourselves to whatever shitstorm moment in time we might be in at that moment. So if I posted all the things that were going on in my life, I mean, I don't use social media very well. I share things about Shift and Mindset Matters and Ice Academy Montreal and Quantum Speed and Rain and Pro Skate. I mean, I love our businesses so much. That's what I post. I'm not sitting there
mhm,
posting, a selfie of us sitting on the beach, drinking Mai Tais. I mean, which we could, I guess, when we do that, but I guess it's how you choose to use social media. I'm really seeing right now with the athletes that I work with and the young people, a lot of them are getting feedback socially and a dopamine hit every time they get a like, for example, or they're trying to become influencers in certain areas so they can get that sense of accomplishment or that sense of being famous or something. And I just think, to me, that takes us so far away from any kind of values
mhm,
based life or any kind of balance when it comes to looking at your own life and figuring your own stuff out, because eventually you're going to have to eventually that you're going to have to be with yourself and your complicated life. And if you're constantly looking outside for that next dopamine hit or that next comparison, then it becomes a very shallow existence, which I think that the happiness economics and the happiness psychology of that is truly driven by that comparison. And to your point, hun, is that the envy also is like, what am I jealous of? And instead of using jealousy as a fuel and a feedback to go after what I want, I'm seeing a lot of the younger generation using jealousy to really beat themselves up or to
mhm,
make themselves wrong or to say, I got to change something about my body or my gender or my sex to make myself feel better. And it's all outside of them. And that's
mhm.
really important, I think, when it comes to balance, when I think of meditation and I think the what gets me into my core, which is what balance means to me, is how do we recognize what's going on externally, take those messages and take that um, those influences, for example, filter them through our values. And that's, I think, the piece that's missing when it comes to the work-life balance conversation.
Well, yeah, and again, it's understanding those values. So when we do our think tanks, when we do our coaching, I mean, we spend a lot of time just helping people really get connected to their values, because it is a tough conversation. If you've never really considered what your values are, you don't even understand that. We're not talking about moral values and social values. We're talking about our own personal values, and that can get to be quite complicated, or feel overwhelming. But when we look at work-life balance, I think we break it down to one fundamental, which is what are generally people seeking, which is they're seeking happiness, they're seeking joy, they're seeking something that puts a smile on their face, saying, okay, I've got this, I'm working and I've got my family and I'm making money and I'm fit and I got time to spend on myself, I'm hanging out with the kids. That is the pursuit of that idealism and the pursuit of happiness. We've talked about this on occasion where we look at the athletes that are on the top of the podium. And now, if you take that picture, you look at this absolutely beautiful, fit couple. They're, getting a medal put around their neck and they're standing there, smiles, waving at the crowd. And it's that snapshot of that moment in time. And for those who maybe have some dream of being there one day, it's like that moment in time is what they're connected to, but they don't see the lifetime journey to get there, the injuries, the training, the discipline, the not going to parties, the eating the way you got to eat, and the huge commitment to get there. Instead, they're looking at that moment in time and going, if I had that, I would be happy. And there's a fundamental that I just want to, before I pass, I want to finish it off, which is, it's a quote, which is, it's not the pursuit of happiness, it's understanding that happiness is the pursuit.
Mm.
Or said another way, okay, I'll say it this way. What really fucks us up is that it's not a destination. Like we tend to put ourselves to think that I'll be happy when, is that even understanding that the happiness part of it is a journey and you have to work at it. It is like a mental game that has to be played, and we have to look at how our thoughts are, the awareness of how we're thinking, the actual choices and the goals that we're working backwards from. It's intentional. And if we're waiting around for something outside of us to make us happy, we're going to live a really mediocre life.
Yeah, and we'd be waiting a long time because, how long has it taken us to realize that nothing outside of us can make you happy? I mean,
Totally.
People that look at, I'll be happy when I'm married. Well, and then all of a sudden you're married and there's all these other new problems.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really moments in time when I feel joy, when I feel true, pure joy. And that's when I know that I'm living my values. So it's not that I'm seeking happiness. It's the pursuit of, it's the journey. I mean, when I'm out in the back 40 with the dogs and I'm watching them play and I'm laughing at their ridiculous antics and looking around at the beautiful, scenery and the life that we've created, there's those moments. Oh, I'm going to cry. Where I have so much gratitude for what we've created that, to me, I don't expect that to be, a long hour, 2 hour, 3 day thing. But if I don't honor those moments of gratitude that fill my heart and then bring tears to my eyes, then I'm not acknowledging what it is that we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
because those moments are what I live for.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's, when we think about what we live for, so I go back always, we want to, remind everybody again, we're doing another think tank in June. So by the time you're hearing this, this will be, I don't know when this particular podcast is coming out. But when we talk about think tank and the work that we do over a 2-day, what we'll call a workshop, is that's what we're having conversations around. This is how do we connect to our values? What are they? What are our highest values? And what is our thought process in terms of how we're setting up our life? I want to leave, as we kind of unpack all this and kind of drift away from understanding that work life balance is really, and feeling that you don't have it is you saying, I'm not happy. And you're looking for something that is outside of you, not taking and understanding that when you start to make adjustments, when you start to drift towards your highest values and put those in place, all of a sudden that imbalance that you feel goes away. You always feel imbalanced when you're living into your values. Is that a fair statement, Steffany?
Say that again. You're always feeling in balance when you're
Imbalance.
living your values.
Yes.
Is that what you said? Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
totally. I think it's when we feel out of balance is when we're either living other people's values, the shoulds, the comparisons,
Mhm.
the snapshot, the influencer, my life isn't as good as theirs. And
The
then you
envy.
start to realize that, if I'm not living my own true values, it's my responsibility to make that change. And that's really difficult. And I find over the years, having people come and go out of my life and me leaving out of people's lives, there's things that happen naturally and not on purpose where you're just all of a sudden drifting away from people. And it's not that you don't love them or care about them. And I have friends that I can, not see for months and months and then spend, like my girlfriend Sarah, we spent 6 hours on the phone the other day while our husbands were out of town and just talked for almost 6.5 hours just to catch up. So there's those moments in time where that gratitude can show up, where those relationships are still there, but maybe they're just
Mhm.
not right in front of you. So I don't know. I would invite just people to now have the conversation about what's important now. Where are you on the journey of your own life? Are you living at least the attempt to be true to yourself? If you don't understand what your values are right now, come to Think Tank. Will help you
Something.
discover that. But the key, one of the first things is what brings a tear to your eye, like what opens your heart, and
Mhm.
start to consider that as almost like a clue to start to discover your driving values.
Mhm. Okay, so let's leave our listener with some final parting thoughts that will bring it into your awareness. So, when we think about work life balance, when we think about how we're maybe not feeling happy, not feeling grateful, not or looking for something outside of ourselves to get the joy that we want, we often talk about gratitude, getting grounded in gratitude, look at the gain, not the gaps in our life. Those are all good tools. And then this one is an important one, which is we hear the phrase, you got to think positive, and positive thinking and positive thinking. And, certainly the most recent data actually shows that it isn't about positive thinking. Yes, it's important, but what we have to become aware of is our thinking, and most importantly is our negative thinking, our self talk that calls ourselves whatever names we call ourselves, that says we're not smart enough, not tall enough, rich enough, whatever the story is. But it's the negative thinking. If we can cut off the negative thinking, it is far more impactful than positive thinking. It is the negative thinking that shuts you down, that takes you and puts you into a crap mood. But here's the problem: by the stats, by the data, and I have no clue how they measure this shit, but it is time and again shows up in studies. 70% of our negative thinking goes unperceived because it's so ingrained. So, in
Mhm.
other words, we're just not paying attention. Now, as aware as you are, and as aware as I believe I am, man, I can find myself being really bummed out in moments in time and have to drag myself from the frickin' drenches and go, what the hell am I doing having these thought processes, and kind of shake it off. And sometimes that shaking it off means going for a walk or doing a 10-minute something, a workout or something, to kind of shift. But it is a intentional, and it's not easy. That's what I got to say about that.
Oh man, there's a great book. It's called Getting to Neutral by Trevor Moawad. He wrote
Mhm.
a book called It Takes What It Takes. And his father was actually the president of the Positive Thinking Association of the US from, in the 70s or something.
Yeah.
And they realize the studies about positive thinking are not, it's not realistic, because we'd be looking at the world through rose-colored glasses and not seeing the reality. But if we can start to be disciplined enough and be aware of the negative self-talk, we've talked before about, would you talk to your best friend the way that you talk to yourself in the mirror? And years ago, I realized that my self-talk was quite negative. I was never good enough, tall enough. My hair was always the wrong color, and my skin was bad. My boobs were too big, whatever. And I eventually just had to start looking at myself in the mirror and calling myself girlfriend and say, "Hey, girlfriend, how you feeling about yourself today? Maybe we should go for a walk," and started shifting how I talk to myself. And when I started calling myself girlfriend, I realized that I wasn't being very kind to myself in my head. So think
Mhm.
about how loud those thoughts are, and really sometimes whose voice is that in your head, and the negativity that can drown out any opportunity for you to feel happy, and even those moments of joy that we were talking about.
Well, I know for myself is that because I'm into economic research, of course, it's a big part of what I do and who I am. And I nerd out all about it, all the time. I'm kind of geeky about it these days. But the point is it's really hard when you look at what's going on. When I look at what's going on in the world, it is freaking hard to stay at least and look at, okay, what's positive coming out of all of this when you look at the doom and gloom and the economic conditions that are happening and the wars and all the bullshit in politics. It's really hard. That's all I got to say about that. But the good news is, on the other side of that, I'm surrounded by the right people. I'm doing I'm doing the right body of work in terms of making a difference in other people's lives, and being able to bring even our podcast, which I don't even know what episode this is. I think it's like 130 something, which means we've been doing this for like 2.5 years. We've been doing this every week, and we love it. So sometimes I don't know if anybody's listening, but we do it anyways. No, we know people are listening, so that's good.
Right, because it's all
Okay,
about us.
it's all about us. So, okay, so let's finish off with the 5 C's. The 5 C's that you got to stop. So bring your awareness to it. First C is quit complaining. I'm brutal at this because
You are. You're just a big complainer.
I complain about weather and politics, mostly politics, mostly politicians, mostly about our liberal NDP government. Let's face it, that's the truth. I
That's
complain about politics. There's no point in complaining other than I want to spread the word. Make sure that you vote, and don't vote for to
more of the
repeat our
same.
federal government. Like, don't even provincial governments. Quit it. Be clear.
Yeah.
Criticizing. I don't criticize much. Again, I criticize our politicians, but if you're going to put yourself in a public sector and then you're supposed to be doing something that you were elected to do and then you don't, or you screw it up, I'm going to criticize. So, but if you get into that environment, if you're working with a group of people in a working environment where everybody's being critical all the time, that can bum you out mentally.
Yeah, and that's not critical thinking. We're talking about criticizing.
That's right. Or feeling even criticized. Okay.
Mhm.
The other is constant concern. So there's a little bit of, all of this is a little bit of stoicism, or a lot of stoicism. These are really, if you read any of the Stoics, and I've studied a lot, and there's lots of it out there now. If you aren't aware of stoicism, then really Google that stuff, because it will really bring your attention to it. So concern, which is worry, which is just always worrying about something that you can't control. And so if you're worrying, you're having a future state that you can't control. And we got to not waste a bunch of our time doing it. I'm not saying any of it's easy. Bring your awareness to it and then back it down,
Well,
back
they
it
say
down.
worry and concern is like a tax you pay on something that hasn't happened yet,
Oh, yes. Isn't that the truth?
right?
And, because we know this and believe this to be true, is that, our mental state has an impact on our physical state. I just had this conversation with Dr. Don McDonald on a podcast, so that'll be coming out at some point. And we talked about that, the physical manifestation of our thinking and how we are. Okay. So these are bringing your attention to it. So number 4 is commiserating. And, there's one part about commiserating where you create the space for somebody to show up and share whatever they've got going on, and you are empathetic. But in the context of commiserating, what we want to be careful of is that, misery loves company. So if somebody's coming in and sharing how shitty their life is, be careful not to fall into the trap of going, well, yeah, you had a shitty day. Let me share with you just how shitty a day I had.
Exactly.
Be careful about
Did you notice, hun? Just wait a sec. Did you know the root of the word commiserate is mis, like misery?
that. That's true, isn't it? Yeah. And then the final C is catastrophizing. And we know a couple people like that.
Mhm.
You're like that when I'm driving.
Well, if you've driven with you, you know what that's like.
I'm a good driver. I'm only ever thinking about precious cargo. I'm a good driver. You overreact to just nothing.
I know,
And
drives you
if
crazy.
anything, you're a danger to my driving because you scare the shit out of me because you always overreact. Anyways, so the point of all that is don't catastrophize. We all have come across those people where it's a big drama and nothing's even happened yet. So be careful about that. So those are the
So
5 C's.
what are
Make
they
sure that
again?
you're not complaining. Make sure you're not criticizing. Drop the concern, the garden variety, worry, anxiety, commiserating, and catastrophizing. Make sure that you're aware of those things. And ultimately, Steffany and you and I talk about it all the time. I know with my shift with my men's guys who are just gotten awesome at it, is being aware of your thinking. That's
Yeah.
it. Be aware of your
Well,
thoughts
just
and
to
take
finish that
time.
off, it's so true. Notice how quiet your life might get and how different your conversations might get if you remove those 5 C's and just see. And it's not about playing a game of pretending to be positive it's about removing those 5 C's and see how much more enlightening and how much more interesting your conversations just might get.
And I'm going to finish off with one final thing that I want to share, which is interesting in our own life. The biggest gift I've gotten over the past few years is that I pine for nothing.
Mm.
If nothing ever changed in my life in terms of stuff I had, I would be just fine. There's not another thing that I want in my life. Now, I don't want to minimize the fact that at this point in our life, at this age, this phase of our life, really, we've spent a lifetime of doing what we do and I guess building assets and or buying stuff. But if I would have gotten this message at 45, I think, yeah, that would be way better. That's what I think. So I don't tell myself a story around it too much because I don't have regrets. But I realize that if I can share anything, the wisdom of a 65-year-old from my point of view is spend less time worried about getting stuff and spend more time having and building relationships, creating friendships, and having experience with people that you want to have experiences with. That,
I mean,
to me, is where we need to spend time in a world that is seemingly falling apart at the seams. And maybe it is. I don't know, but it sure seems like it some days. And that would be I don't know, my wisdom
your
today.
definition of balance, maybe.
Maybe, maybe. That's all I got. Steffany, thank you.
Thanks, son. That was fun.